First of all, as you follow the latest developments in Turkey, how do you evaluate these developments, the possible peace process on Turkish-Kurdish conflict, and also Öcalan's call to end the PKK, lay down the arms, and call for a peace? How do you evaluate this?
Okay. Thank you for inviting me to comment on this. I just have to say that any call for peace and a democratic solution to the long running Kurdish struggle has to be welcomed. I speak as a supporter of the Kurdish struggle, and the Kurdish people have paid with their blood in the search for freedom to assert their identity and to live free from oppression. Abdullah Ocalan is an astute thinker. The Kurdish people respect him hugely, and his analysis of world politics and the role of the Middle East has usually been spot on. But as a supporter of the Kurdish struggle, I am still an outsider. I find myself in a really difficult position of having to comment on a development when I don't actually know what agreements have been made in private, behind the scenes, and in the high level meetings that have taken place. So I am full of doubt because I don't understand the agenda of all the main players in this situation. Erdogan has not made any concessions publicly. Calls for peace and the laying down of arms by the PKK have happened before and have not succeeded. In fact, sometimes have led to a spike in violence. So the obvious question is why now? And if there is a comparison to be made with the last time that the Middle East was in crisis, which was during the Arab Spring in 2011, where it also coincided with the last attempt to a peace settlement, the situation is so different today because that was a moment of hope. That was a moment of possibly people power overthrowing authoritarian dictatorships in the Middle East. But today, the Middle East is in turmoil again, and the many significant changes, the fact that Israel's fight with Hamas and Hezbollah and the weakening of Iran, the fall of Assad, the rise of an Islamist party in Syria, all of these developments have completely recalibrated the geopolitical picture in the area and the distribution of power. But it doesn't feel like a moment of hope. It feels like a moment where things are shifting towards the fascism of Israel, the Islamism of HTS, and of course, the authoritarianism of Erdogan. So I also feel that these changes have actually strengthened Turkey's position. There's a Turkish-backed government in power in Syria, so all the cards seem to be in Erdogan's hands. When Assad was in power, there was a bit of a standoff between Assad and Erdogan, and in that vacuum or in that standoff, Rojava existed, maybe uneasily, but it did exist. Now, the other issue is the Iraqi Kurds. Erdogan has always had good relationships with them, and in fact, those links have been strengthened, which could possibly lead anyway to the ousting of the PKK from the Kandil Mountains. And the other issue, of course, is that HTS is demanding that the SDF should be absorbed into the National Syrian Army. Now, Öcalan's call for democratization, but why would Erdogan agree to those calls when he himself is looking to change the constitution in order for him to undermine democracy, in order for him to remain longer in power than he should? So some commentators have said that's because the Kurdish party, DEM, is the third largest party. He needs their support in order to get the constitutional amendment. But it would be an irony and a contradiction if the Kurds were to support, when they're calling for democratization, that they should support a change in the constitution in order to undermine Turkish democracy. So there are so many issues. The other issue, therefore, it feels to me that this is coming from a position of weakness for the Kurds. At least many commentators have said that. So, in that context, I think even Erdogan and HTS probably believe that, and they will be in no mood to make concessions. The other argument that people have made is that this is possibly Erdogan's attempt to join the EU, and that peace with PKK and with the Kurds will help that. Now, I can see why, at a time when the economy is struggling, the Turkish economy is struggling, joining the EU might be good for it. But I actually really haven't heard very much from Erdogan recently about wanting to join the EU. And of course, the fight with the PKK has drained Turkish economy and resources, but it's also been quite useful for Erdogan to argue that, to deflect the failures of his government by saying that all the resources have to be directed in fighting the PKK. I'm also confused by why Devlet Bahçeli, who is the leader of the ultra-nationalist party, began this initiative, because again in the past, the reason that was put forward by people like Erdogan for the failure of the peace talks was that the nationalists stood in the way of peace with Kurds. So you can see from an outsider's point of view, the number of issues that there are that makes it feel like it's not a propitious time for the Kurds, and that the danger that this might not, no, their demands will not be met, feel to me particularly strong. Now, my biggest interest as a woman, and as somebody who has been really inspired by the experiment in Rojava, the women's revolution, the democratic confederalist experiment that is going on there, my biggest concern is that society might come to an end, that experiment might come to an end. Now, I know that Mazlum Abdi has said that Ocalan's statement does not uh, specifically refer to the SDF. But as far as Erdogan and others are concerned, they've said no matter what the name that you go by, all the Kurdish parties have to lay down their arms. It is also a demand of the HTS, and we know that the HTS is supported by Turkey. So it would be, to me, the greatest tragedy if this peace agreement was to lead to the end of Rojava. Now, having said all of this, I stress that I say it as an outsider without knowledge of the full facts. I also know that the Kurdish people and the Kurdish leadership have been very astute and very canny. They have survived all these years in the most difficult of political circumstances. And I would say not only survived, but thrived. So I'm sure they will be monitoring the situation carefully. And some of the facts that I have mentioned, or some of the doubts that I have mentioned, will also be taken into account by them.
Thank you, dear Rahila. Pretty much you covered everything, but just to underline it, also after the action of Öcalan and PKK, now the both Öcalan, Kurds, and PKK are expecting a step forward in a positive way from Turkish government as well. So, what is your call to Turkish government in that frame? Very shortly, please.
Well, obviously, my call to the Turkish government is to pay attention to the PKK's call. It is a rational call. It is important for both the Turkish and Kurdish communities to live in, coexist peacefully, to be given their rights, to be able to assert their identity and their culture, and so on. What I have outlined is my fear and that Turkey and my doubts that Turkey will not heed this call, but will see it as an opportunity to bring an end to the resistance by PKK without actually giving anything in return. Those are my anxieties.
Thank you so much, dear Rahila Gupta. Thanks for joining us and thank you for your valuable comments.
Thank you.